Hey folks, this was my first trip to Florida in the SR22 and easily the most I've learned on a single flight. From working real weather to flying IFR through busy airspace, it pushed me in every way. Parts of it got intense, especially when a convective SIGMET developed in flight and I had to manage it in real time. Overall, it was an incredibly fun trip, but with some hard-earned lessons along the way. Good morning, folks. We are headed to Florida today. We're going to be stopping once in South Carolina in a town called Greer. It's at Kilo Golf Sierra Papa. We'll be flying IFR down there. We'll be sneak right through the Smoky Mountains west of Mount Mitchell. I just checked the winds this morning. They're actually pretty calm near the surface. And we're going to be flying at 10,000 feet anyway, so we're not going to have any issues. Should be VFR the whole way there. And then we're going to go grab food. And then we're going to depart GSP and fly into KISM. And then over there, it might be a little bit of a descent into some IMC, but I think it should be just a thin layer, if that. And then any thunderstorm activity is going to be way south of us. So I'll double check the weather though when I get to Greer or KGSP. We'll see you guys. The weather was beautiful there. It was VFR the whole way. The wind near the mountain peaks around Mount Mitchell around like 8 to 10 knots, so we weren't going to have any issues with mountain waves. And I was monitoring that too. And then the controller asked me for a PIREP actually, and then it showed up on my iPad through ADS-BN, which I thought was awesome.
There's a river over here.
Is there?
Mm-hmm.
Legion 1849, cleared direct Brasser.
That's cool. This is around the Hot Springs area.
Legion 1849, contact
Very
Atlanta.
cool.
So here we're landing at Greer. That's Golf Sierra Papa. It's a nice airport actually, perfect distance to stop between Oakland, Troy and Kissimmee where we're going, and it's right past the mountains too. So once you get past the mountains, you're kind of clear in terms of terrain after that point. The FBO there was really good. Their name is Cerulean. They welcomed us, they directed us in, they had a courtesy car. I think fuel's a little bit pricey, but I really liked the amenities they had, so I thought it was worth it. We had a bite, and then we were off to depart again to Kissimmee here in a bit. Hey, what's up, folks? We're coming back from food. We went to, was it Mutt's? Mutt's
Yes.
Barbecue?
Yeah.
And it was like a buffet, barbecue buffet, really good, about 10 minutes from the airport, and now we're heading back. Gonna put in the flight plan for Kissimmee and fly out to Florida. So we'll see you guys in the air. So these right here, those are the approach lights for the runway. All right, we are heading out. And Cerulean was pretty awesome. If you ever stop by Greer, highly recommend these guys. Courtesy cars, long runway. ATC was awesome, so highly recommend it. So I would definitely stop again at this airport, and you'll see later in the video we come back here on the way back from Florida. Definitely lots of jets come and go here. I think I saw a couple of major airlines that flew into here too. So after this point, going to Florida, was pretty much flat land. You don't really have to worry about terrain too much at that point. But as you'll see, we'll have to deal with some IMC because Florida and Florida weather changes rapidly. And at the time when I encountered the IMC, I thought, oh man, this is actual real IMC that is, you know, on a long cross country. Well, this is child's play compared to what came later. Yeah, so here's the views. Man, AI music these days is, yeah, I don't know why he's saying Windows down, but... So, trying to get into KISM without an instrument flight plan would probably be more complicated than getting in with it. And that's because you gotta deal with the Orlando Bravo airspace that's just north of KISM. And then, also on the way there, they changed my routing twice, so I had to copy fixes down twice, which isn't bad. Honestly, it's not. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. I was expecting an arrival, and even that wouldn't have been bad. It just would have been different because this is a long cross country. But this was actually pretty smooth. Dealing some IMC was fun, and then the airport itself is pretty great, but you really got to be on top of it. I mean, these people are landing jets all the time. If you can just land and get off the runway as soon as possible, that'll make everything go a lot smoother for you and them. What's up, folks? We just landed in KISM, and I think this thing died either right before I landed or right after I landed. I'm not sure, but what's new, right? Thanks, GoPro. I gotta find a different camera. But yeah, they're gonna actually move us here and then tie the plane down, and then otherwise we're gonna go to our hotel. So, see you guys. Going to parking. Okay, Coronado. First time Naomi told me about it, I was like, corn of the what? I had no idea what she was talking about, but this place is really cool. It's like a city in a city hotel, a super hotel, I guess. I don't know, but cool. Let's go to the hot tub.
There's a sign that says danger, alligators and snakes in area.
Perfect. Dude, like how, like when they planned this place out, were they just like, we're just gonna find a small lake and build a hotel around it? Like, or they just make this? It's crazy. Alright, so one of Naomi's things is she wanted to touch a palm tree in Florida when she came here. So here you go.
It's a lot harder than I thought it would be. I thought it would be more like soft.
So after we got up and touched the palm tree and I drank my coffee, we went to Blizzard Beach Water Park, which is actually a pretty great place just to relax. They have a lot of stuff for kids and whatnot, but also they have lots of bars and tropical drinks and stuff to do. They also have the Summit Plunge, I think was the name. I don't know, Summit wasn't the name, but anyway, I got on that biggest slide there, went down it and tweaked my neck, so that was fun. Thankfully my neck recovered in like a couple of days, and I was, you know, able to fly just fine, but I'm getting old, so that's good. Otherwise, it was really relaxing. Alright, just got done with Blizzard Beach. I am very relaxed, and I'm gonna go back to the hotel. Got a bunch of souvenirs. Oh man, that was super relaxing. Alright, look at this plane. I feel like I should know what that is. It's a prop, but it's got a interesting design. Okay, so the second part of our trip here is we're about to depart Kissimmee and go to Sarasota, which is Sierra Romeo, Quebec Airport. And again, Kissimmee has a bunch of jets. There's a jet about to take off. There's a Pilatus behind me, and so you just got to be on top of it, ready to move. They're trying to get everybody out of there quickly because there's a bunch of planes landing too, so just got to be on top of it. Otherwise, it's really not bad. Weather was fine going to Sarasota. We hit a couple of clouds, maybe that's about it. But the views there were magnificent, as you'll see in a little bit. So this is what I was just talking about. You know, you can see some of the keys that are just west of Sarasota, and we actually stayed on Lido Key and then ventured over to Siesta Key, which was a bit more lively, but Lido Key is a bit more, you know, grown up, I guess. Something kind of funny here was the controller offered me, you know, either the RNAV approach or the visual. And if you're trying to get in as fast as you want, you'd want to take the visual, but I looked at the RNAV approach and it went over the water. So I was like, that's cool, we can get some views, so I picked the RNAV approach. Problem is, there was a jet behind me, and I was actually moving kind of slow because I can only do 110 knots with 50% flaps. You know, my maximum speed there is 119 knots at 50% flaps. It's not like the newer Cirrus where you can go 50% flaps at 150 knots. So my approach speed is pretty slow. You know, I'm still category B, but it's slower. And I felt bad because that controller had to keep vectoring that jet behind me until I made it all the way down the runway. Maybe it was a little bit selfish, but I actually only realized there was a jet that was trying to come in too after I was already on the approach. So, oh well. Lessons learned anyway, but the views were spectacular. So, yeah. And just like Kissimmee, probably more so in Sarasota than Kissimmee actually, they have lots of jets coming in and they're all behind you and you gotta land and get off as soon as possible. And they're gonna be on top of you to make sure you're, you know, they'll always be like, keep maximum forward speed as you're in for the approach. And, you know, asking you where you want to park right when you touch down. So, I mean, it's not necessarily bad. You just got to stay focused on the safety of flight and also try to be nice. You know, don't be that guy that lands halfway down the runway in a Cessna and then taxis the other half just so they can take the last exit on a 10,000 foot runway or something, you know. Just be considerate. Everything will be fine. And then when we pulled off here, we actually had a long taxi to get to Atlantic Aviation North at Sarasota. And I had to pull up my iPad here after we pull off the runway and make sure I know exactly where I'm going after I get my instructions from the ground controller. And you're gonna see the jet that was behind me landing there here in just a bit. So at that point I got my taxi instructions from the ground controller, and you can see that jet that was getting vectored behind us just land, and we're out of its way, thankfully. And I was really proud of Naomi actually, because she listened to the taxi instructions and was able to repeat it back to me, so I have somebody else listening on the radio, which was awesome. We had a long taxi to get to where we need to go, and I'm gonna fast track through that here. But I actually had a couple issues with this FBO. So Atlantic Aviation North, it wasn't terrible, but there was nobody to receive us. You know, at every other FBO I've been to, there were people there to direct us in and receive us. Here we just kind of got there, picked a spot, removed the cone off of the spot, and tied the plane down. And also the car rental company, I went with National. They have this Emerald Club where they'll deliver a car to a smaller airport if they have an office nearby, which is awesome. But they delivered it to the South Atlantic Aviation, so make sure you confirm that with them. Other than that, it was fine. The fuel prices were good, actually. But yeah, I tried the Unicom, I tried the other Unicom, nobody picked up. I was like, does anybody work here? So we picked up the rental car and we went to the hotel and we just toured around, and it was a blast. Honestly, Sarasota is beautiful, and I was scoping it out in case we ever actually wanted to move there. If I wanted to go to Florida, I think Sarasota would be it. This is the nicest feeling sand I've ever felt on my feet in my entire life. This is Siesta Beach on Siesta Key. Apparently the sand is special here. It never gets hot, and it just feels really good. I'm gonna come back another day for sure. So like I said here, the sand on Siesta Key is legendary. It's actually very well known. And the next day we got food and we just went straight to the beach on Lido Key. So this is actually regular sand, not the supreme sand. But we just relaxed here, went in the water, and drove around, got some food, got drinks, went back on the beach, etc., etc. And then the next day we went to Siesta Key and we did the same thing. And to me, that is the ideal way to do a vacation. I don't like running around and doing a bunch of things. I just want to go and relax. So to do that, rent a convertible, assuming the weather is great. That was awesome. So the hotel we stayed at was the Cirque Saint Armand, as I mentioned earlier, or showed earlier. It was a great hotel, great service. The restaurant in there was called Ringside. It was amazing. We went to a sushi place called Sado, and we went to an Italian place called Nonno Umberto. They were all great. Highly recommended. So then, after the trip was basically over, we're gonna go back. I saw this VOR. That's the Sarasota VOR. I was really excited by that. And now we're about to depart Sarasota back to Greer. So, as usual with busy Florida airports, I'm going to get my takeoff clearance, and I'm going to be like 100 feet off the ground, and they're going to tell me to skedaddle off in a direction because there's a jet behind me that's about to land, and they probably don't want me in its go-around direction in case that ever needs to happen. No problem, just, again, be on top of it. Aviate, navigate, communicate, and everything will be fine. Here we're landing back at Greer. Awesome airport, awesome FBO. Obviously we're gonna go back here. And in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about weather. I check the weather even when I'm not flying incessantly just to learn more about it and see what happens. Okay. So here we're about to depart Greer, and the trip becomes a lot more interesting. We're gonna get to that in just a little bit, but one notable item about departing Greer back to the north was the controller gave us vectors to basically circle over the runway, or just south of the airport actually, to build enough altitude before he sent us off north, because there's a bunch of terrain there. And that reminded me of kind of like a visual climb over airport, which is an IFR departure procedure that allows pilots to climb visually over an airfield to a certain altitude before proceeding on course. It's not exactly a VCOA, but it's vectors for it, kind of. Okay, so we're gonna get a bit more serious here because this next part deserves it. Up to this point in the flight, and the previous flights to Florida, and even up to Greer, there was really no issues. Even north of Florida had some minor vertical development, but it was just some minor turbulence. Nothing so bad, you know. But at this point in the flight, around Ohio, Convective Sigmet showed up on my iPad. And then a couple of minutes later, the returns that were just green and yellow, they started to turn to red and magenta. Now red is a no-go, that's pretty heavy precipitation, and magenta is magenta. You definitely do not fly into magenta. That's about 50 decibels in the return, and that'll rip planes apart. Now, at that point in the flight, while I was flying, my ADM was thinking this. There's a gap, I could probably shoot through it. The airports that I would want to land that were nearby, somewhat nearby in the vicinity, were all covered. Okay, so I didn't even have time to think about it much, but I should have spent the time to find an airport that's farther southeast and go land there. So I decided to go through it. My GoPro died at this point, and it was full IMC between those two cells, and there's plus minus 25 knots of airspeed, updrafts, downdrafts like crazy. It was hard to hold my heading, but I did what I was trained to do, which is pull back below maneuvering speed, taking into consideration the fluctuations and making sure to stay well above your clean configuration stall speed. This is what you have to do if you find yourself going through something like that. And it worked, but it also was not the ideal ADM. Ideally, I would have turned southeast and landed at that Charlie airport there. This is what it looked like in my Avidyne. So, I have a little bit of beef with flight schools and how they teach weather. Flight schools don't teach you about the spectrum of weather. I mean, weather is probably one of those things that even senior captains with 20,000 hours are still thinking about. And they're flying airplanes that are extremely capable. They're flying at like 35,000 feet over the weather. They can see what's going on, okay? And they still think about the weather tremendously, especially for their departures and arrivals. When you're flying at 10,000 feet, you don't have that luxury. So general aviation is very unforgiving in that regard. That's why, at that point, I'm basically kind of yelling at myself. It definitely would have been much less stressful to turn southeast, ask the controller for vectors first, and then direct to that airport and just land there and wait it out. Now, thunderstorms usually die down in the evenings, but I knew this low pressure system was lingering, and then there was another one that swept through the entire, Midwest, and that one had a tornado warning the following day, so I definitely did not want to fly in the following day. So this was somewhat get-the-ritis, and I had to get Naomi back home because she had to go back to work on Monday, but it was not worth the stress of flying through those two cells, even though I tried to pick through them and I tried to, look outside and see where it was less intense and talk to ATC, and they gave me basically deviations left and right as required, which sometimes isn't very helpful, by the way, because you're in IMC, you can't really see. You're using your, 3 to 5 minute delay in your ADSB, and depending on how new that is, it could be up to 15 minutes sometimes. But that was probably the right play, just to wait it out till it calmed down a bit, at least till the convective segment was out, and then to continue. So after that, though, it was smooth sailing back to Oakland, Troy. But even then, it was one of those things that you did, but you're not really happy afterwards. You're still thinking about it. I'm still thinking about it right now as I make this video. So my lesson that I'd like to share with you is this. This is what the weather looked like out the window, and this is what it looked like on the returns
And so hopefully we all make the right decisions in the future. And hope to see you next time.